All right.
Madam Vice Mayor, if you'd like to call the meeting to order, you're
Yeah,
welcome to do so.
thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City Council chambers. Today, we're having a joint meeting with the Reno City Charter Committee and the Reno City Council. And since there's two separate bodies, each is going to potentially take separate action on each of the items. Madam Clerk, I don't know, I thought we did our roll call first, but let's do the pledge. And let me ask Margot Piskovich to lead us in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks, Margot. All right, and Madam Clerk, will you call the roll for both bodies, please?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Calling roll for the concurrent special meeting of the Reno City Council and Reno City Charter Committee. We'll start with our council members. Councilmember Breckus, absent at this time. Dewar.
Here.
Martinez.
Here.
Ebert.
Present.
Taylor.
Here.
Reese.
Here.
Sheevy.
Here.
We do have a quorum of the Reno City Council. Moving on to our Reno City Charter Committee members. Chair Brown.
Present.
Vice Chair Green. Pipitone. Absent at this time. Marshall. Absent at this time. Shin. Absent at this time. Khan.
Here.
Piskovich. Opferman. Barron.
Here.
Clifton. Absent at this time. Coleman.
Here.
Larson. Absent at this time. Hoover. Chair Brown, you do have a quorum of the Reno City Charter Committee.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Clerk. And if you could please call the public comment, and then I think you have a disclosure to read.
I do, thank you. Madam Vice Mayor, our first item today is general public comment. Members of the public may hear, observe, and provide public comment virtually by registering through the following link, which can be found on reno.gov/meetings, https://LINKS:/CITY-CHARTER-07-29-24. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the mayor and council as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the council's agenda. Council may not take action upon any matter not agendized on today's agenda. When you're called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. For those participating in chambers in accordance with council rules 6.3.11, while in this room, please be respectful. Disruptive behavior from audience members like clapping, yelling, whistling, etc., which impede the meeting, may result in a warning issued by the presiding officer. If this behavior continues, you may be removed from chambers. If you're an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Our first public commenter is Eddie Lorton.
Okay, and Madam Clerk, also, I notice on the screen, it would be good to see all the participants, both from the Planning Commission and the City Council. So if you could show that screen, I don't know if you can, but that would be helpful. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Eddie Lorton for the record, and nice seeing you here today. I came to speak on the Charter Review Committee and what they're drafting right now, and I think it's important when it comes to the appointment process needs to be addressed. They brought it to a whole new art form on this council where most of the people have been appointed at one point or another, not all, but usually what that means when they do an appointment is they appoint their yes person and give them the fake gift of incumbency. So I hope you'll review it. I like what they were mentioning here, and that is 180 days out or so, or, you know, a 6-month period. If it's less than that, we could do an appointment. And they mentioned they've done appointments before, but that's for committees like the Charter Review Committee is an appointed committee. committee, stuff like that. But in elected positions, I think it's terrible to leave the public out of politics. So why not have an election? People say that certain people are election deniers. Well, let's have an election. So I think that we need to do special elections. I mean, we do spend money on pet peeve projects and stuff, where I think democracy is the cornerstone and the most important thing is what brings us here. So I'm hoping that, in a 6-month period, if something happens, but I wish no one would even run unless they're going to fulfill their obligation. But I know things happen sometimes, but I think that people right now should end up changing this appointing process. It's horrible for our community. You want people speaking for you that are elected. I mean, there's people, like I wrote an opinion piece about something that might be occurring coming up where there's going to be a little swap of positions on this council. And there's people looking for business stating that, hey, can you do business with the future mayor? So I'm hoping that we can put an end to this. And if it's a 6-month period and people quit prospecting from this seat for business and we can move forward for our community. And then when people get elected, absolutely, they have a voice. And sometimes appointees become elected, then it's a different ball game because they're elected. But please consider this for our Charter Review Committee, less than 6 months, then maybe an appointment because we spend money on that. But please consider elections and special elections for elected positions. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Mr. Lorton.
All right, Madam Vice Mayor, we do not have anybody else registered in the room or via Zoom. And, Beth Dory?
Hello, Beth Dory for the record, and I am in favor of 2024-001 suggested by the Charter Commission as written. I think by directing staff to recommend creating a special election to replace a council person who resigns is a no-brainer. I agree with Mr. Reese that council should be judicious when directing staff as to what amendments should move forward. In my opinion, the city lost respect and political capital with our lawmakers in 2022 by pushing the notion of retaining the at-large council position. That was a disaster. I hope this council does not make the same mistake in 2024. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Dory. Madam Clerk, any others?
No, we do not have any additional public comment at this time. No hands are raised in Zoom, and we have not received any correspondence.
Okay. So
Yes,
we'll
Madam
Oh.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make public comment.
Oh, okay, certainly. Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
I appreciate everyone's opinions. I want to make it clear for the record that Mr. Lorton, it's really his conspiracy to scare constituents that I would be stepping down to appoint Mr. Reese. So I want to make it clear for the record today that that will not be happening. I don't know where he got that, but it is his own conspiracy. So I hope everyone feels a little bit better there. So I just wanted to address that. And also I would say this, when council members leave or appointed positions, elected positions, it also makes it very difficult for the council. That was someone elected by the voters. So that's under their circumstance. We can't control that. So this narrative that, it's a big juice job also makes it difficult. I have no problem going out to an election whatsoever, but this is more or less a conspiracy, from Mr. Lorton. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, is there any other public comments, Madam Clerk?
We have no additional public comment at this time.
Okay. All right, well, we'll close out public comment, and I think we're moving on for both bodies to approve the agenda. So I'm looking for a motion on City Council to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
All right, Mr. Reese. And Ms. Ebert, second. All right, any comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And over to you for the Planning Commission, Mr. Green.
Oh. Sorry, who made the motion? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Why don't they have mics?
Vice Chair Green, if you wouldn't mind going up to the podium and speaking, just so that there's,
And
A record
Madam
of the-
Clerk, are there any spare remote mics? I think that would be helpful. They're mostly, the people are clustered over here. If we could get 2 mics, that would help.
we'll have IT bring those out right now. Can you retake that motion, please?
Yep, all those in favor of the motion? Say aye. Yeah. Any opposed? Please say no. Any abstentions? I believe the motion passes, but cool. I didn't hear anyone online.
And just for the record, we had Member Hoover as the motioner and Member Opferman as the seconder.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
And you may want to stay right there because we're going to do the approval of the minutes. And this goes back to our last joint meeting, which was back in August of 2022. So I guess you need 2 separate motions again, Madam Clerk?
We do need a motion to approve. I think you can do, yes, sorry. So do a motion on the first one from the joint body, and then a motion from the second would just be from the Charter Committee.
Okay. You want to lead us, Mr. Green?
Yeah, cool. Seeking a motion from the Charter Committee to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve. Hoover will second.
Cool.
So a motion from Opferman, second from Member Hoover.
And you're saying, Mickey, we would all vote on this? Us too?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain because I wasn't present at the meeting.
1 abstention noted.
I can abstain too, because I wasn't there.
2 abstentions. Any more? I believe we move into a approval on the
Thank you.
matter.
All right. All right, thank you. You could grab your seat, Mr. Green, if you want. They've brought out some mics. And then from it looks like just the Reno City Charter Committee for their June 10th, 2024 meeting. And that's back to you, Mr. Green.
Seeking the approval of the minutes from our June 24th meeting.
I move to approve. Second.
Seconded by Member Priscovich. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Sorry, Vice Chair Green, was that a second by Member Piskovich?
Correct.
Thank you.
No proposals on the record. Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Cool. 1 abstention by Member Hoover. And I believe that again brings us to a point to where that motion passed. Sorry,
All
I don't know
right.
where to look.
Thanks, Mr. Green. We aren't part of that motion.
sorry.
It's just for the Charter Committee. We're going to close out item A5 and move on to B, which are presentations on and discussion on potential direction to staff regarding the Reno City Charter Committee's recommendations for amendments to the Reno City Charter, including acceptance of their final report and recommendations. So I believe that's you, Mr.
Good afternoon, Vice Mayor, Council, Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, Office of Policy and Strategy. Today, I won't actually be giving the presentation. That will be Member Green, the Vice Chair of the committee. But I did want to just give an overview. The Charter Committee, as the staff liaison, I've been meeting with them since January of the beginning of this year. They've met a total of 6 times now, and we went over various measures related to the charter. I gave them a brief history. Specifically, they had asked a few questions about, what does it look like for a charter bill to actually pass in the legislature? What kind of topics have other cities considered? When did charter committees form across the state of Nevada? Those kind of things. And I just wanted to, again, set the stage. This isn't the time to actually select the bill draft request, and I want both bodies to understand that. This is just the time to ask questions, look at the recommendations, and accept or not accept the final report from the Charter Committee. But without further ado, I'll throw it over to Member Green.
Yeah, Mr. Ciccone, I heard a public commenter misstate something, and I wanted to inquire about that. Historically, in the last legislative cycle, the Charter Committee ran a bill. And what was the Charter Committee's bill in the last cycle? It had 2 parts, as I recall. I think they characterized it, the public commenter wrongfully characterized it as the city's bill and that somehow the city had lost credibility. But the Charter Committee actually made the recommendations last time. And what were those recommendations?
So not to correct you, but there were 3 recommendations. Gender-neutral language throughout the charter, the green infrastructure projects within the charter, and the at-large position. And that process was the exact same as this charter review process. It went through and it was included in the final report to be considered by the city council and was accepted by the city council at that August 4th meeting, of which the minutes you just approved.
Let me get some clarity, because I was not aware that the Charter Committee had a bill. I think only the City Council has 2 bills, and they don't have their own bill. We may or may not do a charter bill. Is that correct?
So our charter actually specifically allows the Charter Committee to go find an independent sponsor.
Okay.
That's one part of it.
Did they?
The last time, we had Senate Bill 12, and the City Council had endorsed and actually put that forward as one of our own bill draft requests.
Okay, so they could, if we didn't accept it, get a sponsor for their own bill. But what happened last time?
Last time, the Reno City Council in mid-August, after you had already had the joint meeting, had selected one bill draft request, which was to amend the city's charter.
Oh, okay.
And the second was to just direct staff to focus on affordable housing.
Okay, very good. All right, so do you want to turn over to Mr. Green?
Yes.
Do you have a PowerPoint for us, Mr. Green?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick. And so, just to kick off, just like Nick said, we have had 6 meetings since January 1st, which kicks off our biannual review. And so today is the recommendations that we have culminated and discussed on and are putting forward today for potential action by the City Council. Starting with Amendment 001, which again will require the City Council to declare a special election if there are more than 180 days until the next general municipal election. Amendment number 002, which changes the terms of the Charter Committee's member appointed by the legislature, sorry, can't pronounce that word, to align with the terms of the individual office holder. 003, which requires that the city manager reside in the city of Reno not later than 6 months after the date of his or her appointment. And 004, which is a repeat from our last visit with the City Council, the elimination of gendered language throughout the Reno City Charter. But with that, would love to enter any dialogue or questions that you guys have for us.
All right. Could you put them up one by one again?
Do you want the summary?
No, the one you just had, yeah. So this one, on the special election, it looks like it was a 12-0 vote, 1 absent.
Correct.
Does any member of the City Council have commentary on this? No. What about online? Anyone online? Ms. Taylor, Ms. Shibi? Okay.
No,
well,
Madam Vice Mayor.
who is this?
This is, no, Madam Vice Mayor, this is Councilwoman Taylor.
Yes. Do you have comments?
No, I don't have any comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I do have a comment. I think this was well done. As I said at our last council meeting, I feel that the controversy over the appointment process has somewhat delegitimized our appointees, who I treasure. And they've been with us through thick and thin now for about 1.5 years. And I do believe it would be helpful. I did recommend at their appointment time that there be a special election back then. So I'm being very consistent. I do think that this would be a good add to the city charter. I would make a change. I think 6 months. I was interested how you came up with 6 months. Was it just that seemed good, or was there debate on any other time frame?
And so, and feel free to jump in, guys, if you have anything to add, I think.
Could you speak in the mic? I'm sorry.
One of the biggest things we looked at was what was going to be work and best of timelines for the city. I know we got some advice from both Nick and Nikki about how long special elections take to put into place and what the timing looks at from a logistics standpoint to make sure that it is consistent and, keeps in into consideration the weight of going back to have that election.
So the one change I would make is I think being on council 10 years and living through a number of special or appointments, my thought is it generally takes us about 2 months to do an appointment. We have to advertise for a couple weeks who's interested. There's an interview process, there's a community meeting process, and then there's a whole council meeting to go through the interview and the appointment process. So I would lean towards an 8-month for me, because I think it takes about 2 months, and that position would be vacant for 2 months. And I think if we did it at 6 months, the position would be vacant 2 months, and then they would only fill the seat 4 months, and I don't think they could get their legs under them or really add to the dialogue in that short of time. So my thought is I like the recommendation. I would like to see it be maybe 8 months, but I mean, I'm not married to that, but I'd like to see us move forward. If we don't vote to support that, and if we don't even have a charter bill, because I don't know what bills, to the point made earlier, what bills we'll be endorsing, I wouldn't mind having this as a city policy. It says we may appoint or have a city election. I think it would be good to put some clarity around that process, whether or not it's in the charter, just as more of a policy. But that's just my perspective. And why, again, am I recommending this? Because I think it would give clarity, and we could stop talking about it. We have a process, we move through the process, we get the people in position, whether they're appointed or elected. So that's my thought. I don't know if anyone else has any comments on this one.
Madam
Mr.
Vice
Reese?
Mayor, thank you so much. Mr. Green, thank you so much for the presentation and for the work that your committee has done. Maybe I'll start with the first question I have, which is the type or matter or nature of the public's involvement in these discussions. So one of the things that this body is finds very important is the number of times that the public has to engage in the process. So sometimes we have open houses, sometimes we do forums online. So I want to understand, because I've looked at the minutes of the Charter Committee, it doesn't appear that much public input has been had on the recommendations. So what opportunities has the public had to weigh in on the recommendations just writ large? I'm not talking about this specific one, but what is their involvement been?
My understanding is in the early days of our conversations that we did go back and ask an input from our directive appointees, but I don't know off the top of my head if we went back and engaged with the public on any of our bills.
I think Ms. Piskovich, did you have something to add to the conversation?
I could. I know that this is
Could you
open.
try to use the mic, please? And you can bring it down. It folds. There you go.
I know that the public can come, but unfortunately, I don't recall any public being involved, because I don't think they even know that the Charter Committee exists or what they do or how they do it. And I'm one of the new people, and I didn't know. I mean, it's been learning as I go. And so I have everything they've ever printed. So, I've read it all. But I think it's very difficult to get people to come to something for the Charter Committee. It's at a strange time. It goes generally from 5:30 to 7:30, or sometimes 8:30. It's just a situation where it's a group of people who are appointed by different people who have input. And I don't mean that good or bad, it's just the reality.
Well, and I'm not saying it's a fault of the Charter Committee. I think you've all done great work to volunteer your time. And again, my concern is largely that it's a very large undertaking to change the formational documents. And so we want to make sure the public has the opportunity to have input into it. And so far, they really haven't, as far as I can tell.
I agree with that, and I think what you have to do is make sure that this goes out to the public. I don't mean this in a negative way, but I've already said several times, notice from the city of Reno is very, very difficult. It's an insider game. It's insider baseball. For example, the one that we all agreed on, that we weren't going to let, houses be in single-family areas, nobody in my neighborhood knew about it. And I know that nobody in the city really knew about it. And I think if you go to a different neighborhood, they're not going to know about it, because the city, meaning all of us, we don't get notice. I know you give notice, but 750 feet is really not enough. That's the width of McCarran.
Understand. I have some other questions,
Okay.
but I
Let me go
didn't
around?
want- Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to make sure my colleagues have the opportunity
Yeah.
to weigh in.
Nick?
I just wanted to get on the record, we did have the same open meeting law requirements to allow for public comment. I think compared to last year, we got around the same number of members from the public coming to the events or the meetings. So I think it was between 1 and 3 public commenters over the course of the 6-month period.
Okay. And then one of the challenges, I think, it's not a standing committee, so it meets only for a special purpose for a very limited time, 6 months, 7 months at most. And there's not a lot of time for people even to learn it exists. In a 2-year period, bearing in mind, it only meets for 6 months, once a month. And I think that we're hitting in on an important topic, is how do people get notice of what we're doing, and how do they express how they care. And people that know me know that for a very long time this has been a subject near and dear to my heart, and there's many ways to do it, and I think we keep pushing the envelope on how to do it better. I truly do. And I've been very impressed with what our liaisons have done and our community outreach folks trying different methods, whether it's postcards, whether it's emails, whether it's sign up for lists and it'll be pushed out, those kind of things. So any input on this particular process, since you all have participated in this process, if you have ideas on that, just even for going forward, that would be very valuable.
Yeah, and my understanding is that getting the public to come to meetings is not just a challenge that the Charter Committee faces, it's
Right.
something that's consistent throughout the city of Reno. And so with that, we did talk about additional levers that we could pull. I know one of the biggest things that opportunities and learnings that we had from the first, my first Charter Committee session is that we want to make sure that, one, we had some opportunities to publicize it to the knowledge. That way people know what we were bringing to Carson, in addition to making sure our committee shows up and allows for public comment in that format. But
Let me ask Mr. Martinez, any comments?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'd like to extend my gratitude for you all for the work you've done over the last 6 months to get us to this position, and thank you to the public commenters that came and provided some input. Obviously, being directly affected throughout my professional career by this policy, I think I have a unique understanding of it, and I like to echo some of the comments that were made by my colleague. We do think it's very important that the public interacts with our processes and is engaged. There is a lot of times where we hear from community members that there isn't enough outreach, and I know not just us up here on the dais, but our staff have a really big affinity with wanting to increase the number of access to our information and making sure that we're providing that. And so I think in order for me to understand your recommendation, I'd love to hear more about how this would go into practice. And so just seeing like what happened at the school district, where there was a candidate that had to run multiple times until they were actually duly elected into their position, how would this affect that? So I'm trying to understand, if somebody were to leave, let's say what happened 2 years ago, and that's the same case, and we relive this and this policy goes into place, would that person be special? The election would go for them to cover the 2 years and then they'd have to run again, or would it start the 4-year clock at that point? I'm just trying to understand the nuances of this policy
my
and how it
understanding
would
is that
go
they would
into
finish
place.
out the term in that elective cycle from the person who stepped down.
So even if it's a year out, let's say it was October of 23 and someone stepped out for the election in 24, there'd have to be a special election. Then again, a year from that point, they would have to run again to retain the seat for the 4-year term.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what
Yeah.
the processes are. Not
And I
saying that
think
that will
the-
delegitimize anything, but just making sure we fully vet what the process
And
will
I think that
impact.
process at the school board is a little different. I mean, it was very awkward that, I think you're referring to Beth Smith.
Yeah, it was.
That she had to run to fill the term, then run the next time, which would have been appropriate, but then for some reason, she had to run again.
Yeah.
And I haven't really followed all the legal requirements there, but I think that Mr. Green said it right, Ms. Piskovich, which is, if you, let's say you left a term with 3 years remaining, the next election would be in 3 years, right? And you would run in 3 years, and then, you would
Exactly.
be duly elected. So I don't think it's that complicated here, but I'm sure
No.
there could be other interpretations.
And I don't mean to complicate it, I'm just for
No,
myself
I'm
trying
saying
to
I think it's
understand
better
it.
here than what the school board situation is.
And that would allow that individual to serve for a full 15-year term with them being successful.
That I
For
can't
15.
answer. I mean, it's part of a term.
I
and
don't know if
that's-
Mr. Hall or Mr. Shipman have any comment on that. If someone were to get elected and we pass this policy and within a year they leave office, would they potentially have the ability to serve for a full 15 years in the seat?
Yeah, for the record, John Shipman, City Attorney's Office. So it's a constitutional provision that talks about that, and it's generally a 12-year maximum term. I mean, like maximum years in office. We'd have to go back and look at the specific circumstances in terms of timing and whatnot. There's some case law that bears on whether or not, time, being elected prior, whether that would count towards that 12-year or not.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a couple cases out there, and we could.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to make sure we get it all on the record. Thank you
Good
so much
point.
for the opportunities.
No, good point. And also, we're not planning to vote today. I mean, we're having a dialogue with the Charter Committee, but I think our voting will happen, at least my understanding, Nick, voting will happen at the time we look at bills. Is that right? So this is a great time to get those questions. And if we don't know the answers, maybe Mr. Shipman could help us by the time it comes back to know.
Thank you.
Okay. How about you, Ms. Ebert? Anything?
Well, the 12 years things brings a lot of questions in because we do currently have people appointed now. So how does that affect people's terms when their 12 years is up currently?
For the record, John Shipman, it's not an appointed versus elected thing. It's the Constitution essentially says that you can be part of a governing body for 12 years. Whether you're elected or appointed, it doesn't matter. But it goes to the issue goes to your eligibility for the next election. Whether you could, if you were serving 10 years in office and then you wanted, and the term was 4 more years, another term would be 4 more years, then the question is, and that would put you over the 12 years. Whether or not you were eligible to run for that. And we do have examples of that. I'm just a little reluctant to opine on any particular case without having the case law in front of me.
Yeah. Do you think next time, Mr. Shipman, and we're going to discuss this as a potential bill, you guys could be prepared to discuss some of it anyway?
Yeah, for the
Okay.
term limit stuff, certainly, yeah.
Anything else, Ms. Ebert?
Yeah,
we're gonna go to all
I
four,
do have concerns about that because, if we do allow that, then we have people that, currently are appointed, no disrespect to anybody, but that can presumably serve for 14 years or more, correct? And people that were elected in the first place are only eligible to serve for 12 years, correct?
Again, we'd have to look factually at it, like specific. So if the question is somebody's appointed for like a year before,
What if they're appointed for 2 years?
or 2 years, then we'd have to look at, in that third election, or that fourth election, whether or not the prohibition applied. And again, we can do that, and I can have that. I don't want to like spitball it without looking at a particular set of facts in front of me. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let me ask online. Ms. Taylor, anything on this one?
No, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, and Madam Mayor?
Yes. I want to go back to the noticing. I find it very, very frustrating. I'd love for Nick or Mickey to weigh in on what the requirement is on noticing the public outreach that has to be done. It's something I've always been frustrated by. Let me give you an example. I think it was last week I received a card in the mail asking the community to weigh in on Title V, I believe. Well, my issue with that is how would the public possibly know what Title V is, what Title 18 is? There's got to be a much better way to get, much better community involvement. So I would love to hear what's the requirement on noticing, because I know there is a requirement, and I think, and I don't know, do we still have to put it in the newspaper? Because I believe at one time that was a required mechanism is through the newspaper. Maybe someone can clarify that, but also go through what noticing took place. But I do think that I do see it, I believe, on social media quite a bit. But remember, there are older demographics that are not on social media, and I can't blame them. It's not a space that I love particularly, but maybe give us a little bit of feedback, Nick and Mickey, what we're required to do and how we can change that. And also, we need to put it in terminology that the general public can understand. I would say this, I hear a lot about times in which we hold these meetings. I hear that obviously after 5:30 is better, especially if you own a business. Most of us are running businesses, between the normal business hours. So typically later is better for the general public. But just give me an idea, Nick, of the requirements. And I do think it's something that we have to look at and figure out how we can do it much better.
Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, Office of Policy and Strategy. For the record, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a planner, so I'm not used to frequently noticing things, and I don't want to be misquoted. I will say that to your comment about what time the meetings are, our meetings are always at 5:30 for the Charter Committee, with the exception of this one. And to your point about plain language, I can speak to that. We were very deliberate in the charter review process and using what I would call plain language. Like using terms like role and authority of the mayor when they were discussing those positions, as opposed to actually, saying section 1 of the charter for the city of Reno. So again, I know I only answered part of your question, but hopefully that helps.
Okay. Let me see if Mickey, can you weigh in here?
Yeah, so.
And wait,
Oh, go ahead, Madam Mayor.
no, I was just saying maybe Madam Clerk could weigh in. Thanks, Mickey.
Yeah, of course. So Mickey Huntsman, City Clerk for the record. So the Charter Committee falls as a public governing body, I guess, or a committee for the organization. So they follow standard OML noticing requirements, which is just the publication of the agenda 3 days prior to the meeting being held. I think when you're talking about the postcards and public noticing, there's other sections of NRS that govern the types of notifications that are required for certain like land use development or changes to land use. And so that is outlined in NRS. And so that's the section of code that staff would follow specific to that type of language that's required to be used on the notifications, and then also the timing of when those notifications should be distributed. So there was no additional public notice done outside of the agenda posting.
And just, I'd love to agendize this on a future agenda, just this whole issue of public notice, and I'm going to share why. When people are very motivated, they do come. Like, we just had a meeting last Wednesday in the evening, and we had a Mater Academy, and we had this entire room full. We had the entire lobby full, and it was even spilling out to the street. So when people really, really, really care about something, they do show up. They got that word out through their own channels, right? For people that were supportive, people that were opposed. But secondly, and this might be of interest to you, Madam Mayor, for a future agenda item, 10 years ago, I shared with our staff a TED Talk that was about how to give clear public notice in simple language. It was a 3-minute TED Talk. It was brilliant. And to your point, using the arcane legal language was, you could include it, but it was better to just include really super simple language on the postcards. I shared it with our management team at that time. It could be time to revisit that. I mean, it was beautiful. It was done in Canada, actually, this TED Talk. But I brought it here because, like you, Madam Mayor, I really care about this issue and struggle with what is the best way. So there are clearly some people have figured it out, right, on how to do better, and other people are self-selected based on the topic at hand. So here we are. Okay, getting back to you, Mr. Green, on your, do you want to share with us your second proposal?
Madam Vice Mayor.
Oh, did you have questions?
Yes, I have more
Okay.
questions on this item.
Apologize.
Mr. Green, first of all, thank you. We don't expect you, of course, to be an elections lawyer, so please feel no pressure to answer some of these things. We're looking for some guidance from our legal counsel, and some of the questions are perhaps beyond the scope of what I think is related. But I have questions about what the Charter Committee did on this issue to come and arrive at their conclusion. So, for example, did we look at all the other elective bodies in the state and what their appointment is? For example, our lieutenant Lieutenant Governor, Kate Marshall, she left that job midway. Some people would say, that is a breach of trust, right? People were supposed to be in the office, so they die. I think that's a red herring. But the point is that appointment was then made by the governor, right? I look at another state next door. Gavin Newsom appointed a U.S. Senator, LaFonza Butler. So appointments happen at every level. They happen at the school district level. So did you look at what other cities, counties, municipalities in this state do in terms of appointment versus elections?
Correct. So when we went throughout the entire charter process, we looked at other city councils in Nevada. In addition to, I think we looked at potentially California and other outside states. We didn't compare it to other bodies of government within Nevada, and so I think we stayed pretty consistent at the city council level.
Okay, but what about the
What'd you
Clark
find?
County Commission, for example? What do they do when they have a vacancy? Do they hold a special election?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Point, right?
Yeah.
So the Clark County Commission appoints. And so I wanted to, so it sounds like we still have some work to do there on that issue. Let me also ask, did you analyze the voter turnout in special elections? Because one of the things I'm concerned about is that when you have a special election, let's say your special election occurs in March, right? So it's the winter, you've just had an election November. We've had historically low turnout in the last June primary. And so I'm worried about a very small number of people who are organized or perhaps have the resources where they're very wealthy donors write them campaign checks, or people self-fund because they think, hey, I'm a businessman, I can write $100,000 to my campaign account, that they are able to fund, but the other candidates are not. So what is the type of turnout one would expect in an off-cycle election?
I don't know that we have any metrics. We did look at voter turnout as a whole, and I know Nick and staff did prepare that metrics for us as we were determining our decisions. And I think the impact for us when it came to the determination for this special election session was, one, what was going to afford the most voice for the people to come in, but overall, in the shortest consistent amount of time, that way it gave us more of an ability to act. I don't know that we were looking at, I'm sorry, was that?
No, that's okay. We try to make sure that there's some time limits on it so no one monopolizes the conversation.
Gotcha. And so I don't know that we considered specifically voter turnout as it in relation to the special election. It sounds like the conversation the council has been having is that getting people to come out and vote has been a challenge overall consistently throughout all of Nevada's different voting
Vice Chair
elections.
Green,
Yeah.
just as a heads up, Member Barron has raised her hand
Yeah.
to help
And I
answer
was-
this question if you'd like.
And Mickey, I was going to ask if we could put back up that view.
Okay.
Even if
Absolutely.
it's not the whole council, if it's all the people online, I could see them raise their hand.
Okay.
Sounds like, Mr. Green, you're saying your committee thought about it, but maybe there's more work to be done, right? Because I've looked at the national trends. So in small special elections that happen for appointments, the turnout model is right around 7% nationally, right? So 7% of the people are going to have any impact on that. And it varies. Minnesota, I think, is the high water mark at 11%. So that's why I'm saying this is a question I have. There's a related question, and that is, what did the Charter Committee consider when it asked about the style of election? So is there going to be a general election? Is there going to be a jungle primary, which is where all of the members run in one thing? Because I can see a scenario in which you tell me that, hey, what we're going to do is have one election, and you have it on a tight time frame. So let's say you have 8 weeks for people to declare, file, decide to run, and you've got 10 people. So you have 10 people who run. You have a winner-take-all primary. You have a 7% turnout. So the person who wins is going to have 1% of the vote in a 10-vote thing. That does not seem consistent with a larger recognition that the community, which is represented by us as a representative democracy, who have been voted on in these elections would be able to make that based on the people who applied. So this is the other concern I have, because you haven't laid out to me what type of election strategy it would be, whether it be a primary and a general, or whether it would be just one primary. And again, if you just take the two things and it says we have low turnout, a very lack of engagement. You have some people who claim to self-fund their elections, that they would essentially be able to buy an election in a special off-session election because the number would be so small, and they would be able to do that. And that doesn't seem representative. So these are the questions I have to ask, because I think fundamentally, no one is going to say we don't like elections. Elections are a great thing. We have free and fair elections. Some people have even denied the results of last time's election. You know, in this city, they have said those elections are invalid. Election deniers, right? Conspiracy theorists, right? But I'm not sure we should be taking the advice from those people who have run 5 and 7 and 8 times unsuccessfully or have denied elections. But I'm asking you whether and to what extent those things were taken into account by the Charter Committee. And it sounds maybe like it didn't get that far.
Sounds like no, but it sounds like we should think about asking our staff to come back with answers to some of these things.
Yeah.
Let me we've gone a little over, as you can see, but let me just do one more round. Is there any more?
Please.
Yeah, Ms. Hebert?
Well, I think that it's not necessarily the job of the Charter Committee to look into these finer points. I think it's the Registrar of Voters' job, so I'm not disappointed that you guys don't have these finer details worked out. And I think that really democracy is very important. And I think it's the feedback that I get from my constituents is there's a perception that elections don't matter anymore, that voices don't matter. And I think it's really important for us to prove that perception wrong. And one of the best ways we can do that is by having elections and letting people know you are going to decide who represents you. And the fact that it might be a smaller turnout is irrelevant to me. We need to let people know that they're making the choice. And statements about election donations also don't really to me personally matter, considering, you know, when I ran and was elected, I spent, I believe, less than $40,000 in my campaign against somebody that I believe spent over, I think it was like $120,000. So if we want to talk about donations, everybody up here, their C&Es are available on the Secretary of State's website. People are getting more than 100,000 donations easily. But that doesn't necessarily assure election. So I don't think that argument holds water either. I think at the end of the day, this argument is about how important is democracy to you. To me, it's extremely important. So I'll support this. Again, I think it's a voter registrar's decision on how to work out the finer points. But I think it's our job to decide how serious is it that we engage with our voters. So thank you for your work on this.
Okay, I'll get right to you in just a moment, but let me ask, I wanted to clarify something. Mickey, I believe it is the clerk that would run our special election, not the registrar, but please explain that.
That's correct. That's correct. So in circumstances of a special election, Mickey Huntsman, City Clerk for the record. In circumstances of special elections, the city clerk would work with the registrar of voters to conduct a special election if one happened.
Okay, all right, very good. Yeah, and then Ms. Baran raised her hand, and then we'll come to you, Ms. Piskovich. Ms. Baran?
Hi, thank you. I think that I just wanted to address the availability to the public when we were talking about public engagement, but then also, you know, try to avoid these kind of long back and forth. You know, if the public's not showing up, council members are also free to come to our meetings, and that hasn't really occurred. And we did discuss at length and even looked at numbers of voter turnout when we had this conversation before. I remember, Green, I don't know if you were there during that conversation, but we did have a very long meeting about this, and we did compare election results with it. And I think that it would have been really helpful to have at least one council liaison or not a council liaison, but an actual council member at some of these meetings. And I see that that kind of sometimes presents a gap when we're here. And then in the matter of, you know, civic engagement, I think that sometimes we do see people go for appointment, and what the selection from council is not necessarily representative of the people that did show up to the meeting. So I'm kind of hearing two different things there. And just as a matter of, just to put a point on it, I know it's very difficult to disagree with people and that people have long histories together, but perhaps, people stop coming to meetings after they're called conspiracy theorists and they're called names by the folks on the dais or otherwise. I think it's important to, use a little bit different choice of words. Everyone that doesn't agree with someone is not a conspiracy theorist. Maybe we could just be a little bit more, have a little bit more decorum in the way that we engage with the public so that they do feel as if they're being heard when they show up to meetings. Again, I understand there's some very contentious characters at hand, and maybe some people are conspiracy theorists, but that's not always the case. So let's just try to think about why maybe some people don't feel like engaging.
All right, thank you so much. And then we'll go to Ms. Piskovich.
Thank you. I recall when we were doing this, we had several statistics regarding elections. And as I recall, we had, obviously, if it's a special election and there is news about it, people do vote. But where the problem is when it's kind of like, we don't know. But we did talk about all of this, and it's my impression from our discussion, and I could be wrong, that we were considering one election. So if there were 20 people, there were 20 people.
It was like a winner-take-all concept.
I think that's what we discussed, but I'm not positive.
And then you're just saying advertising of the election would be important.
Very important.
Member Piskovich, if you can move the mic or at least talk into the mic, that would be helpful.
Okay,
Just
I
move it
apologize.
closer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Ciccone, the city council in Las Vegas used to have off-cycle elections, and they've now come into line where they're holding them normally. So it was the case that in the election cycle 2 cycles ago, the last time they did it in March of an off-cycle, you had council members for a city of 1 million people who were elected by 1,000 votes. Is that correct? Roughly. I think Ms. Fiore was elected by 1,200 votes, Ms. Seaman by 1,300 votes. But the reason why they moved those elections from being in a random March in an off year was because of the low voter turnout, right? So an actual election, which did not need to be advertised, it was just when they were held, was moved to be in line with the other elections, correct? Because they felt it was important for there to be a high turnout for such important offices.
It would be accurate to say the legislature felt that it was
The
appropriate.
legislature, right. They
Correct.
didn't change it through their charter. The
Correct.
legislature did it. Yeah.
Legislature.
And I just wanted to clarify, I've corrected at least a member of the council up here. I do have to correct the charter committee. We do not review elections with respect to special elections. There's not a special election to compare to in Reno, Nevada. We looked at the issue of 50% plus one for primaries, and that is when this body reviewed primary election results compared to general elections, but we did not review special election results.
Okay.
Well, I would encourage the charter committee members to look at the special elections of communities like in Minnesota, where they do have special elections, and see what the turnout model is there, because it's a very good example, very similar in size to our community.
And I'm not sure they're going to be meeting anymore, but
So-
we might get that input.
I think we have the ability to call another meeting, right,
Okay.
prior to a meeting, and then I think this is
Good.
all important conversation before you guys decide which bills you want to
Right.
adopt on August 14th. And so we still have time to engage with the public, get that data
Right.
like we're talking about, and so I still think it's a full conversation for consideration as we move forward.
Right, okay. And last call, anyone online, either the charter committee or council, want to weigh in on this before we move on? Oh,
Member
yes.
This is Councilwoman Taylor. I just
Taylor.
wanted, there was a comment made about attending the charter meetings, and I was able to participate or attend those meetings, at least 2 of them via online. And I didn't see that I think that sometimes the charter committee wasn't all present there either. So it was a very interesting experience, and lots of work goes into the recommendations. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, and I too attended online, at least one, maybe two, but Ms. Opperman?
if it's green, is it on? Yeah.
Green's on.
Thank you. I think, I just wanted to weigh in on some of the comments, and Councilmember Reese, I think you highlight some really excellent details, and that's important in terms of what type of election and voter turnout. That's really critical. I do want to say, we've seen that the last primary had particularly low voter turnout because people are just feeling less and less invested in elections. And I think Councilmember Dewar, you really highlighted it with a good word, which is delegitimize. And I think, nationally, federally, but also locally, people just feel increasingly or decreasingly connected to their elected officials. And so in terms of those details, I think those absolutely need to be explored, and some of those details we did not explore as a charter committee. But I do think it's important to think about the overarching theme and the fact that unanimously, minus one person who was absent, we felt it was really important to bring back this idea of special elections. Obviously, there's a question of timeline. We felt like the shortest timeline possible is important. So less than 6 months, it's really not practical to have a special election. Your comments about it takes about 2 months, I think that can be explored in terms of whether it's 6 months or 8 months. But just that overarching theme of our entire committee felt like it is important that we give our community access to vote for someone and not simply have an elected board decide on that individual.
I think your point too is that there's only, let's say if it's a member of our body, 6 people voting versus maybe 1,000 to use a low number, or 2,000, I think is maybe your point. Okay, and then we always worry about information, right? There's low information voters, other people really dive in and find out about all the candidates, and kudos to them. But we're not going to be able to control that either at the council level, or, I interviewed every candidate, or if it's a general election. So listen, in the interest of time, we've spent about an hour on this one. I
have one more question.
Oh, you have one more
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have any information on how many other appointeds there are in the state of Nevada on city councils?
I don't have that data readily available.
Okay.
Well, Nick,
Where
any
we
info?
stand with other councils, percentage-wise of how many people are appointed, how many resignations we have in comparison to other bodies?
I don't have those numbers readily available, so I don't feel confident telling you one way or the other. I do know that other city councils do have some other city councils do have at least one member that was originally appointed.
Okay, just one that was originally appointed, because right now, we currently have 3 council members up for election that were all originally appointed. So to me, that feels like we're kind of skewed a little bit heavy with appointments on this council. So I was just curious to see if other councils, maybe other bodies aren't talking about this because maybe half their council hasn't been appointed. So just wanted to call that out too. So thank you.
All right, and let me make sure, was there anyone else online that wanted to weigh in on this? Any of our members?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. I would say, I think the council is always happy to come to a charter committee meeting. I don't think that there's any issue with that. But however, the last charter commission that we had, there was a council member that was intimately involved, and there was a perception of persuasion. So, it's one of those things that I think, we really highly look to the commission to be very independent from the council. I think that is always something that, is that we should be very mindful of, but always happy. I think anyone on this council is very happy to come and give you any feedback that, you so desire. But I would say that's also a double-edged sword. I think the Charter Commission should be very independent of probably any opinions of council members. So I want to say that. The other thing is, hold on, my internet is going in and out here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you so much. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that I think we're living in a time where everyone needs to be mindful that regardless whether you appoint or it's an election, both have become talking points for if it's an election, then that was also rigged or they cheated. We're seeing that now more than ever in certain national elections, and I think everyone knows probably what I'm talking about. If you appoint, then it becomes the same narrative, that it's an inside deal, inside juice job. And I would say, I think it's very indicative of when you have three appointees or, Councilwoman Ebert just sort of alluded to it. One of the reasons why you're seeing vacancies like this is because of the tumultuous time that we are seeing in politics, that it's become very hard for people to serve or want to serve because of this narrative that we're seeing. So I think we have to be very mindful about not playing into a lot of the scare tactics, conspiracy theories that typically are being floated. And when we all talk about democracy and how important it is, I think that's the first thing to really be mindful of. So I think all of us have a responsibility to make sure that we're not feeding into that, because it only divides us as a country and as a community. So that's where I think it's very clear to see that now more than ever, people don't want to serve. It's a very scary time to serve. We're seeing violence. You just saw what happened in Pennsylvania. You see what happens locally, trackers on my cars, other issues that I haven't spoken publicly about. I know firsthand there are certain times that, now your own well-being is being attacked. So I would just say all of us have a responsibility to unite instead of divide.
Okay. Thanks so much, Madam Mayor. I'm hesitant to close this out because it seems like there is more interest. So let me ask, is there someone else who'd like to opine on either body? Oh, yes, of course. Please go ahead, Ms. Hoover.
Member Hoover for the record. I really appreciate the discussion, and I just want to put on the record that the reason this charter committee brought this issue up and is moving forward with it has nothing to do with a single person or a singular race. This has everything to do with trying to ensure that the voters of this city have a voice to ensure that their voice later on is also being represented on this council. And this conversation has been happening for years and years and years. And so whether we hopefully move forward with 6 months or 8 months, that is completely up to your discretion. We did review a lot of facts and a lot of figures, and we wanted to ensure that across this city, we also reviewed all the cities across the state. And so I just want to thank Nick and Mickey for all of the work they did on this, because this was also a contentious issue during our charter committee as well. But I just want to point out this has nothing to do with a singular race or person. We really want to do what is best for the voters in the long term. And we hope that whatever the recommendation may be, that we all can at the end of the day agree that it is best for the voters and best for their public comment to be included in this conversation. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right. All right, going once, going twice. All right, let me ask Mr. Green, could you bring up your next topic? There you go.
And so moving into Amendment 002, this would just simply, on its face, change the term of the charter committee. The charter committee members appointed by the legislature to align with the terms of an individual office holder.
So give us an example.
At the end of Mr. Reese's appointment, I would also have be vacant. My position would also be vacant on the
So
charter
when
committee.
he terms out, or when he's, you're on a term, and I think you're appointed each year, or Mickey, is it a 4-year or 2-year appointment? Nick?
I just wanted to provide clarity since this was actually asked for by staff. Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, for the record. So basically for City Council, it's very clear. It aligns with the term of that individual office holder, as Member Green had indicated. For the Senate and the Assembly, for some reason, it is strangely worded so that the Assembly gets 2-year appointments, the Senate gets 4-year appointments. Let's say that you are halfway through your Senate term and you've appointed someone. That makes it confusing for me as staff, and I'm like, do I keep this person on for a full 4-year term, or does it tie to that individual office holders?
Gotcha.
So this just cleans it up. It makes it so I don't have to actually make a decision, and I understand what the legislature intended for us to do.
So would each one be a 2-year term going forward?
It would align with that office holder. So if you're a senator from, let's say, the Senate majority, you would have to, the Senate majority leader would have to actually align that to someone from our area. So for example, that could be like Senator Daley. He would be the person whose term that is tied to.
Oh, okay, tied to a term versus just generically from the Senate.
2 or 4 years was, yes, correct.
Okay, or rather than tied to a term, maybe they could just have a date certain that it ends.
For purposes of operationalizing this and making it easier on my life, that works.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mr. Reese.
Thank you. Mr. Ciccone, don't go too far. I guess I'm trying to understand exactly what you said, because now I'm confused. What if you're an assembly member, and we'll use an example. So Rochelle Wynn resigned her assembly seat to then run for a vacated Senate seat, as I recall. And so there were there was a resignation first of the senator who was, do you remember who that was? I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure I give color to it, because now I'm seeing an issue both related to the prior conversation, which is to say that assembly members, when they resign, are appointed by the county commissions from the same party. So again, democracy didn't crumble when those appointments happened. And then now you're saying that somehow those assembly seats would be tied to members of this body where they left, because now you have Rochelle Wynn, who left the assembly but then went to the Senate. Someone in the Senate left. Those people would then lose their seats on our charter committee?
So you've brought in Southern Nevada, which is a whole other beast when it comes to the amount of Senate or Assembly districts that actually overlap those cities, is one thing that I'd point out.
Okay.
It
Could
would
you use
align.
a local
Yes,
example?
yeah, I'm trying to. So Senate District 15, that is one that actually would overlap with the city of Reno. So let's say that there was a senator, just for,
They're ratty.
sure. So let's make it simple and say that that person had resigned their term. It would be through the rest of what is intended to be that full term.
I see.
So they'd have an initial appointment and it would last for 2 or 4 years, lined up with the original term of the member.
Correct.
Okay, it seems pretty straightforward to me. Ms. Hoover, yes.
For the record, Miranda Hoover. I'd like to speak on this because it directly affects me. So former Assemblywoman Jill Tolles appointed me. She has been off of the Assembly for quite some time. There was no, based on just operations, there was no clear-cut means, and Nick and I have discussed this thoroughly, there was no clear-cut means for City Council staff to understand, should I leave, should I go, should I stay, who to contact, what to do. And so to clearly define into how this body actually should be appointed and how we should operate, we all agreed that putting in place for both the Senate and the Assembly terms should line up the exact same way as for all of those that you get to appoint. And so it really is back to the full body. So when we talk about the Senate majority, it really is the Senate majority office. It really is the Assembly majority office versus the term. Do I love this body? Yes, I do, but I didn't know how long I was supposed to stay here. But so because it directly affects me, we've had a lot of these conversations, and I fully agree that to ensure this same issue doesn't occur again, that we should specifically put this into our charter and ensure that the staff can do their job.
And Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, for the record. This is how both the city of North Las Vegas and the city of Henderson, their charter committee is set up. Theirs was created more recently than ours, and the language, in my opinion, is a little clearer. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask on the city commission here, council, Mr. Martinez, any comments? No? Ms. Ebert? No? How about online? Either planning commissioners or council members? On this topic, it seems pretty straightforward and a simplification and a good idea to me. Okay, so I'm sure we can overcomplicate anything, but it's better than what we have now, right? Right now, it's a morass, it's very vague. And so anything that would bring some clarity and just define these terms would be helpful, I think. Okay, all right. Let's move on to your next one.
Moving on to Amendment 003, this would require that the city manager reside within the city of Reno within 6 months of being hired.
Okay. I guess I'll start it off. I generally appreciate where this is going. I do think people should be of the community. I would broaden it to the county. And the reason is many people don't even know where the city-county boundaries are. I have a very jagged line in my ward too. You know, as you go straight down Virginia Street on the west side, it's a very jagged line. Some developments are in, some are out. And the same goes for South Reno and down, you know, where all the borders are, it gets very challenging. I just think a simpler approach would be to say, live in Washoe County. Now, I know we have some awesome staff also that live in Sparks, for example, and I love our little brother Sparks, frankly. And I think it feels like part of our community. So I really don't think they absolutely, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, have to be a City of Reno member. But then we also have staff that live in outlying areas, whether it's down in Carson City, Gardnerville. I mean, these are staff, that's not the manager. So my thought is Washoe County, but I'd love to hear what anybody else thinks. Mr. Reese, you want to go first again?
I guess I'm trying to figure out what is the problem you were looking to solve, because I'm not aware of any city manager in the time that I've been in this community that did not live here. So just what was it that you were trying to solve so I know what the issue was?
Yep, and correct me, anyone on Charter Committee if I'm wrong, I believe the big thing that we were trying to solve for was ensuring that the resident or the person who was coming up for eligibility for the city manager position resided in Reno, because that way they would be more in tune with the expertise, experience, and also different issues that the city was facing. And someone who is a city manager, for example, in Sparks, may be more in tune to handle the conversations in Sparks rather than coming back into Reno. I think it also helps with the conversations we're having around making sure that voters understand the experience and overall picture of the candidates who come forward and serve in the city manager position. But if anyone else would like to add more context, whether online.
Green, I'm still not sure I understood your answer. Are you saying that someone who applies to be the city manager from Poughkeepsie must move here and cannot manage the city from Poughkeepsie? Or you're saying you only want to see candidates candidate for the job of city manager who currently now reside in the city of Reno?
What? I'm sorry?
Ms. Hoover?
Member Hoover, for the record. It would be the first one. So we outlined this information that after they receive the job, within 6 months, they need to become residents of the city of Reno. So anybody from anywhere could apply, they could get the job, but they do need to, if they don't currently, move within Reno City proper to keep the job.
And have we had city managers in the history of the city manager's office who do not live in the city of Reno?
My understanding is in the past, we have had those apply. I don't know if anyone has actually received the job.
Well, I can tell you, Ms. Hoover, that we have an outstanding opening vacancy in that office, and anyone who applies or who is selected must live here. Now, whether they must live in the city of Reno limits or must live in the greater, Washoe County, Reno Sparks, Incline Village area, I don't know. I'm reluctant to say where anyone must live. They choose their residence for a reason. Obviously, I don't want to see someone who lives in Roseville and commutes every day to be the city manager. But again, I'm just trying to understand, normally we're trying to we have a problem, we're trying to find a solution for it. This seems like a solution in search of a problem. So I just don't know that there's any appetite to do this. But again, I expect the person will live, whoever that person is, here locally.
So I'll give an example. I think it hasn't happened here, at least recently, but there are other elected bodies where the executive has failed to move to the community over a certain period of time. And I think that it's probably, at least this is what I've heard, it's more preventative. They don't want to have that arrive and then not know what to do. Like maintain a residency in Las Vegas, or maintain a residency in Florida, or maintain a residency somewhere else, and then do commuting. And it has happened. And I think they're trying to be proactive, and that's why I'm supportive, although not as restricted as Reno. But anyway, I think it is important to become a member of your community, the culture in which you live, understand the environment in which you're trying to manage. So I would be supportive of it, again, in a little broader context. But let me ask Ms. Ebert or Mr. Martinez, any thoughts on this one? Yeah?
Yeah, I don't personally see the problem with somebody living out of the area prior to, but you
No,
said
not
this is
prior
within,
to.
okay, yeah, within 6 months, yeah, no, I think that's okay.
Yeah. So you're okay, and Mr. Martinez?
Yeah, I would also agree. I would also agree with some of the comments about this not necessarily being a case, but I appreciate you all being proactive and trying to keep us out of that hot water that we've seen happen. I would also suggest maybe looking at the county overall, not just the city of Reno, because if you're on Veterans, for example, going north, you can be in 3 different jurisdictions within 2 miles from your Loma to Gregg Street. So it's all one region, and I would just appreciate some more lax in that specification.
Okay, and anyone online? Let me start with you, Ms. Taylor.
No, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, Madam Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I agree with you, Councilwoman Dorr, Vice Mayor, in the sense that it should be broader to Washoe County. And I would say we did have a city manager at one time that lived in the county. And some of those reasons were that they had a lot of animals, and there are certain reasons why we might be seeking more land or those types of things. But I think, to your point, and I've seen it over at the RCVA and maybe on other bodies where, if someone lives certainly outside, the county, has 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that's very problematic. We have seen that in the region, right? So I would agree that living in Washoe County is important, so they understand the community and the dynamics. I don't think we're big enough to where, like, we live in San Francisco. We're still very much one region, whether it's Sparks, or, the county, or even Carson City, to be honest with you. And remember, you have a spouse too that might have a job, whether it's in Carson City or in Sparks or those types of things. So can you imagine if you appointed someone and then all of a sudden said, hey, you have to move? I want to appoint someone for their talent and their ability, not on the lines in which they live, per se. Obviously, locally is always great, but I think we are a small enough region to where we certainly understand the dynamics of, the complexities within our own region. So I would say, Washoe County, but I think you have to be very careful, because then you're not basing their qualifications really on their talent. You're basing it on lines in where they live. Now, again, being outside, in California or even Southern Nevada is problematic. You want someone that's fully invested. But I would say, Washoe County would absolutely be fine. But again, I think then you're putting someone's ability to be a good city manager sort of at risk versus, the right candidate versus the lines in which they live.
Madam Mayor, I want to concur with you too, because just sitting here thinking about it, I mean, we have staff here at City of Reno that live in Truckee, right? A different state. And it's only maybe 30, 35 minutes, maybe 40 under certain traffic conditions away. But it is a whole different state. It's kind of a different culture. It's governed in a different way. Whereas a Carson City is about also 30 minutes away, but it's in Nevada. It's in the center. It's at the hub in Nevada. So perhaps it could be, we set it within Nevada and then within a 45-minute travel distance or something. I don't know if that's important, but all these things we can think about as we move forward. But Washoe County might be a good dividing line, frankly. So anyone else? What about those on the commission, the Charter Commission online? Yeah, no one has a hand raised or wants to speak. Okay. All right, any last comments on this one? Here at the dais, here at the tables. Ms. Hoover?
Thank you. Miranda Hoover for the record. We have no problem with expanding this into the county, but what I would also just suggest for thought is that, you could always make it either city or county limits, but you also could add in a provision that says, unless the full city decides to declare an exemption for someone. So,
Yeah.
there's lots of ability
I
for
like
us
that.
to move things around without getting so specific that we may be, disqualifying a great candidate or something like that. So just my thoughts.
I like that very much, allowing the possibility of an exemption by a city council. Okay, like, it would be more of a guidance, okay. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Cool. And this one is simply a revisit of this discussion from our last session, but 004, which would provide the elimination of gender language throughout the Reno City Charter,
Okay.
which is pretty explanatory.
Fully supportive over here. Anyone else comments? They're all head nodding. Ms. Hebert. Online, with the council, Ms. Taylor, Madam Mayor. Any thoughts on gender neutral language? Okay, any members? Yes, I see Ms. Opperman.
Thank you, Member Opperman, for the record. I'll make this brief. I just want to say, I know this has been a topic of the Charter Committee for, I believe this is the third time in a row.
Right.
So this just continues to be a focus of ours. It feels like a very easy shift. Just for your awareness, we did change the bylaws of the Charter Committee to also be gender neutral. And so this just continues to be something important, and we would love for this to be dealt with so we don't have to continue bringing it to City Council
Right.
to change the charter.
Very good. Okay. Well, last call on this. I don't think you'll get any argument. We've included it in our charter bills for, this would be the third time, 2 other times. So, okay. Do you have any other recommendations?
We do not at this time.
Okay. All right. I would like to introduce 2 recommendations for the Charter Committee to at least know about even if you're not meeting again. And I've been very consistent since the first Charter Committee. The first one is about our attorney, and this is always awkward, they're sitting here. But I have a strong feeling that the city attorney should be hired by the city versus elected. And today, Reno and Sparks are the only cities in Nevada, to my knowledge, that elect their city attorney. All the others, and that includes Elko and Wendover and Las Vegas, et cetera, all hire their attorneys. I advocated in our first Charter Committee, I advocated for it today. I think it would depoliticize the position and allow them to provide, really get down into the weeds in terms of recommendations and advice for us. And this is no aspersion on Mr. Hall, because I think he's done a great job and he knows it. I've had many, many conversations with him. But I just think as a practice to sort of go with the rest of Nevada, I think there's a reason, and I don't know all the reasons, and I'm not going to argue that one is better than the other. I just think for consistency. But I do think that it would actually empower in some ways the office to work more closely with our senior staff. That's just, my thought. I don't know. I'll say both of mine, and then we can open it up for any comments from the Charter Committee. The second one is really about this whole issue about mayor and council being a separate position or the same position. Ever since I got elected, this has been, again, just like a perennial issue similar to this appointment issue. And I really believe that the mayor, I've seen the mayor serve for 10 years, and I really do believe the mayor serves a different function than the council members. Yes, she votes, but so do mayors in other cities. They don't all just break ties, and I would love to see a little more research on this. I would rather put it to bed under our terms rather than continue to fight about this at the legislature. In the last mayoral race, that there was again a legal challenge. I think in the world where there are legal challenges, that we should make a definition that's clear for everybody. I do think that it would be potentially beneficial to have a member of the body that served on the council, whether that's for 2 years or 12, to be able to run for mayor. I think it's a different kind of job. That's just my perception, my belief. I think in the first few years of the mayor's term, it really hobbled her till she got her stride in terms of there were questions all the time. And again, I'm going to go back to legitimacy. Well, can she do this or can she do that? Or what's her actual role? Or is she of us? Is she not of us? I didn't like that great amount of confusion. And I would like to see it put to bed. I think it could be a simple sentence that says these are separate positions. The duties are already laid out in our charter about being able to call special meetings, emergencies, set agendas. The regular council members don't have those powers. So I think it was clearly intended to be a different thing, and I'd love to see words that just say, these two jobs are different, are separate. So those are my two additional thoughts that you did not bring up, Charter Committee. Maybe you talked about them, I don't know. But let me just hear, let me ask you, did you talk about either of those two things? And okay, please weigh in.
Yeah, it got brought up in quite length of conversations. I'm trying to remember specific details, but
Yeah, Ms.
Margot, yeah.
Piskovich, sorry. I know your name very well.
Don't worry about that. The very, very first meeting, there was discussions about whether the city attorney should be hired or should be elected, and that was actually tabled. Said
Just tabled?
We did not want anything to do with that, and
Okay.
we also said we wanted him or her to be elected. And the reason being is if you're an attorney, you need to be separate from your clients, and you need to be separate for everything that you do. And that got tabled. I don't even remember who did it, but it was totally tabled, and we said, we're done.
Okay. Well, Ms. Piskovich, you being an attorney, let me just ask you. So all the other cities in Nevada do it a different way.
I really don't care.
Okay.
I think you need to have independence.
Okay.
I've been a lawyer for 43 years.
Right, I know.
And so I would in no way
Mm-hmm.
want to have my client telling me what to do. That isn't work.
All right. So I too have worked for government for about 40 plus years. And every other place, not just a lawyer, but teams of lawyers have been part of that staff. And they've worked hand in glove with the staff to provide independent advice. But at the end of the day, the policymakers are the staff. The lawyers are advisors. And that's just a world that I've worked in for 40 plus years as a government employee. So,
Well, that can be true in certain government situations, but we're talking about what do you want to have happen? You shouldn't be able to browbeat your lawyer. That's the bottom line. I mean, if you've got a subject matter, and I don't care what it is, whether you should build here or build there or whatever, the lawyer should know what's going on, and the lawyer should say, yeah, that's a good place, or, oh, you've got a problem, you're going to flood zone.
I've never seen any of them be shrinking violets, frankly, or not share their advice.
I just think that it's wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if you're an attorney, you don't have your clients telling you what they want. You
Yeah.
have to evaluate what they need.
Okay.
And if they don't like your opinion, that's fine. Go get a different one.
Yeah, well, and that's also something I don't want to do is go shopping for legal opinions. But we can differ. I mean, respectfully, it's my perspective that it may work better. But anyway, let me, any other planning commission members on that, and then we'll come back to council. I'm sorry, I said planning commission, I meant charter commission.
Yeah, I just know somebody said, let's bury it, and we.
What's that?
Somebody just said, let's just table this, we're not going to deal with it.
Okay.
We don't want it, we want him to be hired. And I don't
Okay.
remember how that came about. I
All
really
right.
don't. It wasn't me, but.
Okay. Anyone online? Okay, how
Yeah.
about on city council? Anyone online?
Yes.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
I guess, see, it's very hard because we work very well with Carl, but, I think you have to ask too, who does the city attorney's office represent? We've been fortunate to where Carl's super accessible, always really willing to help. However, but sometimes I see where the council might say, hey, let's go in this direction, and the attorney's office might want to go in a different direction. And I think, a lot of times I hear, well, who do they represent? Do they represent their office? Do they represent the council, or do they represent the community? And sometimes there can be a lot of, difference of opinion there. And so for instance, what if you, say you want to go and settle the case, and then you end up in court and you end up paying a lot more than what you would have settled for, right? And then, I don't know, Margot brings up a point of like, go get a different attorney if you don't like what you hear. I think it is their job to absolutely, tell you on the legal side, but sometimes that's not always cut and dry. And when you get to court, it can be very interesting because you don't know how a judge is going to perceive that. Again, I think we've been very fortunate because Carl knows, I always call him the one and only Carl Hall. But we've been lucky to have an attorney that's super available, super committed, works incredibly hard, has built an incredible team. But I do wonder sometimes, under some of that direction, what about, if it's an appointed? I can understand Margot's thoughts there, but I just don't know, because I do see sometimes you might not be sure of, because I think a lot of people, if you think about this, a lot of people think it was the council's direction. And a lot of times we have to say, no, that's our city attorney's direction, especially like takings on land and things like that. We have to follow that advice. But I do think the council oftentimes might go in a different direction. And then, we fall to the city attorney. And so then that kind of puts you in a little bit of a situation where you're trying to explain to the public that you really didn't have any purview over that, which can be where the public feels that they're not represented. So in times, I think it can be a little challenging. But we've been fortunate over here at the city of Reno. But I think, when I think back to where Julia Ratty, went to the legislature on this very issue, was probably very different for the city of Sparks. But I'm not so sure that it shouldn't be aligned with the entire state of that position. I can see both sides, but there was a reason I think, Julia brought it forward.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you represented, every issue has multiple sides except gender neutral language. And, we can make an argument for anything, but I do think you're hitting on something, which is that the attorney deals with a range of issues. Some are more administrative, some are more policy driven. And I do think that I do think that this is the primary policymaking body, and that the lawyers should work to represent those policies, and not that they haven't. But I just think it should be institutionalized that this is who they work for, the council and the city manager. So that's my thought. May or may not be popular. Let me ask any other council members like to weigh in. Ms. Hebert?
Yeah. I mean, I do have comments on that. I mean, they're the city's attorneys. They're not council's attorneys. So if we were appointing them, they would have to, kind of change course with whoever appointed them, I would presume. And that's really, from my understanding, not what the role is. They're the city's attorneys. So the voters should pick them. They should be protecting the city's interests. They also kind of are there to kind of help guide us, make sure that we follow the law, and that they're not there to follow how we tell them to interpret the law. So I think it's important that we keep them as elected so that, they can stay true to what the position was intended to be at the city of Reno. So those are my comments.
Okay, thanks. And let me just share, there are many agencies that have attorneys, big agencies. We're thinking TUMWA, we think RTC, we think a school board, et cetera. All of these agencies hire their attorneys, and they may change their attorneys over time. In TUMWA, we had the same attorney for 20 years, and then we did a RFP, and we interviewed attorney firms, and we ended up selecting a different attorney firm. There were different policy issues in front of TUMWA at that time. So I'm giving you some examples that it may not be a sea change, looking for a different opinion every minute. But I think that there should be some consistency and alignment with the body, the policymaking body. Mr. Reese.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dewar. For my part, and like Ms. Piskovich, I have a 25-year history as a lawyer, and I can see it from both sides. There is certainly an issue about a client and their relationship with their attorney that relates to the duties of loyalty and confidentiality that are challenging when you have dual commitments, right? And so my colleague from Ward 4 talks about them being the city's attorney, and I think that's true, but at times they also are our attorneys. So it kind of cuts both ways. I think we've left this issue behind. I think we've been debating about it for long enough. I do think it's inconsistent to say we should have special elections because we want to give the will of the vote to the people and then at the same hand take away an elected office. So I don't know how to square that, Ms. Dewar. And it's not being argumentative. I mean no discourteousness to it. It's just I don't know how you have both of those positions. At the end of the day, we and the city of Sparks are the two anomalies, I think, in the state. And both of those lawyers in both of those communities are good and gracious lawyers, capable and qualified. I'm not sure that this is the area where I think we need to go with the relative little political capital we have. You also mentioned, Ms. Dewar, this question about the mayor. And for my part, I think perhaps I would characterize our current mayor's time in office a little differently in terms of needing time to be on the upswing. But I also think that no one needs to be on this body 24 years, right? So 12 years as a council member, 12 years as mayor would seem to me to be excessive. I think, there's term limits that are recognized, and the term limits get a little wonky because some people were in one office and then they switched to another office, and that was the recent kerfuffle that happened in this last elective cycle. And then there are people like me who are appointed to fill the remaining term of a particular office. And then have 3 terms of office in front of me if the voters should see so fit. So I just don't know that there is a necessity for anyone to spend more time. I also am not sure that this is a hard job, and it's made more hard by people who laugh, about cars being tracked. People who are literally sitting in our audience who are laughing when the mayor is saying, I felt threatened by a car being tracked. Just 24 years seems a lot of time to be in an office. So I just am not sure that I think that that's also where my political capital would lie. The mayor, in our case, does perform a very different role than we each do, but I'm not sure that again, is a problem looking for a solution or a solution looking for a problem. So I would not be in favor of either of those, but I do think there are reasonable arguments on both sides of the issue, and you've made a compelling case.
All right, thanks. All right, anyone else? Mr. Martinez on either topic? I know this is a thing of first impression, hasn't been vetted for 6 weeks, but it has been, 6 months, but it has been vetted over a period of 10 years, both these topics. So.
They have it. I know I've had a couple conversations, and I know there are some comments that are still to come, but just to share my opinions, I would say that, in consideration of the amount of BDRs that we are able to sponsor and our political capital down in Carson City, I do think that we need to focus our efforts through the Charter Committee and just go based on the recommendations that we're provided today. But I do think that there's merit in continuing the conversations that the Vice Mayor has brought up today. So I'll just leave it at that for today.
Well, I'm good at calling things out in the room anyway. Ms. Ebert, did you have a comment about the mayor issue?
Wasn't the term limit set by the state?
No, what happened was it was set by our charter, and the state has term limits. And then there was a lawsuit about whether these are different positions or the same positions.
Okay, so it was established.
And then there was another lawsuit. So I just, I want to get it clear, and they do it different in different cities. Just down the road in Sparks, I think the mayor only votes to break a tie. Do you know about the term limits of the Sparks mayor, for example?
I don't know the term limits. That was actually a question that was raised. Is Sparks treated differently because their mayor's role is clearly cut out in the charter? And
I believe that they don't have term limits because their mayor is not a voting
That's
member
correct.
of the body. So
That's
it is different.
There's your answer.
Yeah, so
But-
they could not only be 24 years, they could be 50 years. in
Yeah,
this, but go
yeah.
ahead.
But I mean, I feel like this is kind of maybe a little bit of a dead horse. Like, how many lawsuits do we need to have about this? How many times do we need to be told? Like, how much energy do we want to put into this very specific argument? And you know, there's some ambiguity. I can't say that word right now, but I think you know what I mean. Ambiguity around term limits for those that are appointed right now. With, you know, when is that, 12 years? How many elections? You know, if you get elected 3 times, but you've had 2 years already, like, what happens for those last 2 years, you know? I think that maybe there should be some energy put into that, since there does seem to be maybe some gray area there. If we're gonna put energy in towards anything, I would think that would be something I would be more interested in, because I think it's relevant to 3 of our council members right now, versus something that's already had several lawsuits. So,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, thank you.
All right, just 1 minute, Ms. Piskovich. And then we have Kathleen and the mayor. Did you have a comment on either one, Ms. Taylor?
No, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, and then Madam Mayor, any more comment?
Yeah, you know, I've been here, done this. I think it becomes very party oriented, and I do believe in term limits, absolutely. And then I think, I mean, if there's, you know, some issues with sort of that 2-year carryover, which, you know, that just sort of falls in that place. You know, I don't think once you're elected, I think the people want you to serve that out. But the term limits, mayor is very, very different. If you go out on the street and you ask people if there's a difference, they absolutely would tell you 100% there is. I think it's very misleading to the public. I always have. But I think, you know, this is something that, you know, there hasn't been a lot of appetite. It is interesting. I think Mayor Martini served for how many years? It was a long time, maybe 2 decades. I can't remember. You know, so I've been there, done that. And quite frankly, too, you know, the council did not weigh in whenever I brought it up. So there was not an appetite to do it then, and I don't think there's an appetite to do it now. I also don't think people really understand the role of the mayor. They think the mayor runs the city on a daily basis, when really it's the city manager, because we are a weak form of mayor government. So there's a lot of complexities around this issue. So, you know, I don't really know what to say anymore,
Yeah.
but I do think something that has just been circling around for a very, very long time. And if the parties don't have a lot of push for it, you will never see it. Me as a nonpartisan, I go down to the legislature and both parties run, and it's really, they tend to only coalesce whenever maybe I'm on the side of whatever that party issue is. You know, just like, you know, when we were talking about, you know, council members weighing in to charter committees, you know, there was a lot of persuasion on certain political party sides to make sure that ward only voting passed, and look at what ward only voting has done now. I think, you know, there was just recently something that came up where a council member wants to see something in her ward and it didn't pass, and we've seen that in your ward, Madam Vice Mayor. We've seen that, right?
Oh, yes.
So I think once you have parties that want to see that, then it will come to fruition. But until then, it's something that is probably, I would say, at this time, more important to get other work done.
Right.
And, you know, I felt very strongly about that. Everyone knows that. You know, I just do, because I've sat there. I know the difference. And I've also sat at the at-large position. So I understand the importance of that. And that has gone away. So I think, you know, it becomes more of an issue and a party politics type of dynamic until those party politics wants to take that on, then that might be something that moves forward. But at this time, I would say probably no appetite, rather see the council focus on other things that we can get done and agree on.
Okay. Well, what I hear you say is DOA, dead on arrival. And I just appreciate the opportunity to bring it up because I think these are still important governance issues that go right to the very heart of how we operate. And I'm one that always wants clarity. And that is why both of those were things I at least wanted to bring up to daylight and talk about here. If we never talk about them, then, just certain things get embedded and continue on and become the way it is, right? And we don't even know that it isn't necessarily the way it is elsewhere. So we just think it's the way it is everywhere because we do it this way, and somehow it's better because we do it this way. So appreciate the time to raise those two issues. Let me ask, is there anyone else that would like to bring an issue that the Charter Committee didn't address, or Ms. Piskovich?
First of all, I would like to make it very clear we did address that issue. In fact, I brought it up when we were talking
The
about
mayor or the attorney?
mayor. When we
Oh, the mayor.
we that got tabled. The attorney thing just went away within probably 10 minutes of the first meeting.
Okay.
When we were talking about, first of all, I don't even know people's political values or what they think. We didn't talk about that. We talked about what we thought was best for the city, and I'm not aware of any party politics in it at all. In fact, I only knew one other person on the Charter Committee. So that's kind of not involved. But when we were talking about the election after 6 months, after 6 months, I brought it up and said, why isn't the mayor's different? And it was said, and they said, because it's in the charter that they are equal, and that's how we do it. I mean, it was that simple.
Just the way it is.
The way it is. And so, because I was concerned if the mayor should be considered a different kind of entity because of the responsibilities. And they said, no, it's the same. They're all equal. They're all equal. And
Well, that's what the law, the lawsuit said.
That's
but-
what it is, and that's what I'm saying.
Right, but I'm just sharing in practical, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk
No.
over you, but in practical experience, I find they're quite different. So-
Well, there are some differences, and yet there aren't. And so we were told to leave it alone, to be
Yeah.
very candid.
Okay. All right, anyone else online, either of these two issues?
Can I just clarify something, Councilwoman Dewar?
Yeah,
I wanna-
please, Madam Mayor.
I want to clarify this for Margot, that whenever I was saying the party politics, it had nothing to do with this charter committee or what you guys reviewed or how you weighed in on this subject. That was in previous charter committee meetings. So I want to make that very clear because to Margot's point, I understood that they did not talk about it or bring it up. And then the other point was that they are, well, you know what I would like to know? Who said that they did not want to bring it up? That was just the way it is and you were told not to bring it up?
So Nick's coming up.
I think that's also sort of interesting.
Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, for the record. What Member Piskovich, I believe, was referring to is when we're talking about the need for a special election or lack thereof on that amendment, we told her or indicated to the board that for the purposes of that special election amendment, it did not need to be clarified that the mayor and the council are separate in that amendment because they mean the same thing in the charter. That's the only time that we told them, no, you don't need to further explore this language.
Okay, may have been misinterpreted at that time or interpreted as something like, don't talk about that. I don't know. But for future if you happen to serve and everything's on the table, there's nothing verboten to not talk about. That's the purpose of you being here, and you got to make best use of your time. And you're only here for 6 months, so we need your brains on this. So really, and the reason that you're selected is because you have some knowledge of how government works, some knowledge of the challenges that we face in running the city, so that you can bring good ideas to us, even if it's not your personal idea, might be a friend or a neighbor or a colleague. You are a conduit, and that's how you've been selected by all the people that appointed you, so just bear that in mind. If you thought that certain topics were off the table, Ms. Pistovich, I don't think that is true. If you really wanted to talk about it, I'm sure that they would have let you talk about it, you know. Yeah, okay. All right. And then let me ask, I think we're drawing to a close. I know we have some public comment. Before I go to kind of wrap this up, is there any more comment on any other topics that the Charter Committee did or didn't recommend, or that I recommended, or anyone else? Okay.
Madam Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
I think there was a comment earlier in the conversation when we discussed your first recommendation that it originated out of the discussion of doing the 50+1 vote in the elections during the primary. I'm just curious how that conversation turned from that into a special election process and how that came about.
Nick Ciccone, Government Affairs Manager, for the record. Those were considered as two separate ideas, and you'll see that in the final report and recommendations. All I was clarifying is that the only data we looked at had to do with the 50%+1 item and not the special election item.
And that wasn't put
But
forward as...
both were considered as potential ideas for the body to consider.
And I didn't put it forward. I mean, you know, I'm content with how it is. I mean, I just raised the two that I think are perennial itches that need to be scratched, so to speak. But did you want to talk further about the 50+1, Mr.
I just wanted to make sure we understood and it was on the record how things got
Well,
there.
no one, the Charter Committee hasn't brought it up. None of our members have brought it up, so I don't think it's in contention right now. But yes. Okay, well, given that, I think I'm about to draw this part of the meeting to a close, unless anyone has any final comments, Mr. Ciccone.
Madam Vice Mayor, I would just recommend that you make a motion to approve the final report and recommendations.
Okay, but is
Or
the final
acknowledge.
report done? I mean, it's complete.
Correct. They
Okay.
had, the Charter Committee had already voted to approve their
Gotcha.
portion, so it would just be
Okay.
for the City Council.
Well, before we do that, let me call public comment.
Got to take a motion on the item, no?
No, I want to call public comment
on.
before we
I
do
see.
that. So, Madam Clerk, who is available for public comment?
Eddie Lorton.
Okay.
And if you're on Zoom and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand.
Gordon. We're addressing, I guess, my conspiracy theory. Well, we've been right for the last 12 years about everything. I hope I'm wrong on the mayor switching seats. So I definitely agree on appointing, being thrown out, and doing special elections. So I definitely agree on that. You could tell who is for appointing and who's not. So don't be intimidated by a word salad and do the right thing. So don't get used, as you've seen how they got rid of the at-large seat, and then they tried to get rid of it because it was going to affect people. So I hope in the future to stick to your guns and do the right thing. That would be great. And now let's get back to the Supreme Court case, which I set case law. Lorton versus Jones, everybody is aware of it, or those in the know, I guess. And we'll go back to this, if your guys aren't clear on this, and it says 12 years on the same governing body. I didn't want to waste another 80,000, so some guy tried to take him to court, and he didn't even have an attorney, so no wonder why they lost. And then they were able to run an extra couple years. So yes, appointed time is inclusive in that time, but I guess now they're to the point to where if they're going to include, if they've already served 12 years, they can't run. And if it's under the 12 because appointment time was part of that time, then I guess they can run, and then it overlaps in between. So that's something to be worked out too. But I didn't want to waste 80 grand to prove the law again. I thought we were going to be okay during the election, and I did lose, but we got a lot of votes. So now that's clear, I hope. 12 years on the same governing body. And every charter is different. Yes, Sparks is different than Reno, but Reno, see, and if you go back, like once I set case law and term limits, then they're shuffling after that to get rid of the at-large seat, which, you know, was just 1 of 9 counts I beat them on. And now coming up here, now they're trying to make the mayor a different position. So they always change the rules for them and their friends' benefit. So it was proven that the mayor is part of the governing body, so except for ceremonial purposes. So like the at-large seat was citywide, they were, and every district is different to where everyone ends up, you know, they represent their ward Okay, and now we're back to the elections again on this part that you represent your ward. Well, I'd rather have 1,000 people from the ward voting on the special election than the 6 left over, and then they have special interest groups in mind when they select their people. So I'd rather even have 50 people vote. If it's a low voter turnout, it doesn't matter, just so it's of the people. So I hope you consider that, and I think we should elect a city attorney because he's not in their pocket. So I believe in elections, and maybe a police chief should be elected like a sheriff. So here's things you can think of, but the 50-1, when it comes to 50% plus one in an election like the Sparks Charter, I don't agree with that because it's advantage incumbent. So I don't like that either. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Lorton. Any other public comment, Madam Clerk?
Madam Vice Mayor, we do not have any additional public comment.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'm looking for a motion to consider approving the report from the Charter Committee.
I'll move to accept the Charter Committee's report.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Reese, second from Mr. Martinez. Any comment on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Good work, Charter Committee. We know you put in the time, and we know you had rigorous debate, and we appreciate the commitment of time you made to our city and making our city better. And I think we're going to carefully consider your recommendations, and I want you to stay involved so that, you know, you're either here in the audience or participating in some way when we actually go to vote on our bills, okay? All right, thank you again. I mean, you really did some due diligence. Appreciate it. We're going to turn now to final public comment. And Madam Clerk, is there any final public comment?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. We do not have any public comment registered.
Okay, we'll close out item C and move to adjournment. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
Second.
All right, Mr. Reese and then Mr. Martinez, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously and we are adjourned.